Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first discovery session of 2024. My name is Alyssa and James. I'm the Director of Engagement for Efficiency Canada. I am joining you from a very cold Calgary, Alberta. Efficiency Canada operates within Carleton University. And with that, we acknowledge that the location of our campus sits on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. In doing so, we acknowledge we have a responsibility to the Algonquin people and a responsibility to adhere to Algonquin cultural protocols. I am delighted to welcome James and Alyssa, who work with Efficiency Canada. They are typically the authors of the provincial scorecard, which we did not do this year, but they're here to present what we did in the interim. So with that, I'm very pleased to hand it over to James and Alyssa.
Hi, everybody. As Allison mentioned, I'm James Gaede, Research Manager at Efficiency Canada. I have been the lead on the Scorecard project since 2020. And today, like Allison mentioned, we're here to talk about our program's results report. So 3 things that we want to talk about today: a little bit about what the scorecard is and maybe a little bit about how it's changed over the past year. And then I'm going to pass it over to Alyssa. Alyssa's going to look at the results that we compiled and analyzed for the 2022 program year, and then pass it back to me, and I'll just talk a little bit about our plans and timelines moving forward. Allison already mentioned it, but we didn't do the scorecard this year. So there may be people in the audience that were eagerly anticipating the release of our annual scorecard, which we've done since 2019. We didn't do it this year, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. But first, just for background, in case you aren't familiar, I'm going to explain what the scorecard is. As I mentioned, it's an annual report that Efficiency Canada has put out since 2019. It's a transparent and evidence-based assessment of provincial and territorial energy efficiency policy frameworks, as well as results on certain metrics. Basically, what the scorecard is, it's a large report that consists of a long series of metrics that we use to assess the performance of provinces and territories on energy efficiency. Broadly speaking, there's 2 types of metrics. There's policy metrics that look at whether and how a policy might exist in a province. And then there's outcome metrics, which look at the kind of quantitative results that might be linked to a policy. In the scorecard to date, we've always totaled the scores of these metrics out of 100. And the last scorecard that we produced, the 2022 scorecard, which came out 2 Novembers ago, had that mix of weighting in scores between policy and outcome metrics. We try to weight the outcome metrics a little bit more heavily because they are the ones that are a little bit more quantitative and a little bit more transparent in how we analyze them. The policy metrics are a little bit more qualitative, generally speaking. And yeah, so that's the scorecard. Overall, the objective is to benchmark and share best practices across the provinces. And with the weighting, also to promote a little bit of friendly competition between the provinces and territories. The scorecard is usually a year-long process, although we've made some changes. So Allison mentioned we didn't do the scorecard last year, 2023. And that was because of a decision that we made at the beginning of the year to move to a 2-year scorecard process. And instead, what we have decided to do is produce in the odd year a shorter programs focused report. And that shorter programs report still went through these same steps that we do for the larger scorecard, which is some initial discussion about what the metrics are. We didn't weight them this year. So in the programs, what we're calling the program's interim report, there's no weighting, there's no scale, there's no marking or assessment of grade or like points rather based on the metrics. But nevertheless, we still did talk about what the metrics should be in the program's report. Then we move on to the research component, which consists largely of desk research, but also the preparation of an information request that we send out to stakeholders across Canada, who then dutifully provide the data and return it to us in a timely fashion. It's a lot of work, so we really do appreciate the participation of our information request respondents. And then we commence to analyze the data, prepare the report, send it back out for peer review and to the information request respondents for a double check on the data. And then it comes back to us when we do the publication. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've chosen to move to a biannual kind of scorecard regime where the fuller scorecard, consisting of all of the metrics and weighted out of 100, will only come out every other year. So there was no full scorecard in 2023. There will be this year. The decision was made for multiple reasons. One of them being it takes a lot of resources, not only our own resources, but also the resources of our information request respondents and other stakeholders and participants and peer reviewers to produce the scorecard every year. And so we wanted to not put too much of a burden on ourselves, but also on the others, which would free up a little bit of time for us to do deeper dives in policy areas that the scorecard often identifies as being important, but which we don't really have the space in the scorecard project to delve into in great detail. To compensate, the policy tracking that we do as part of the scorecard is still ongoing. It's always ongoing. It's a kind of daily affair to try to keep up with policy developments across the provinces and territories. And what we've been doing instead is to keep track of them internally as much as we can without issuing information request respondents. And when we have become aware of an important development, we'll send updates via Efficiency Canada's monthly newsletter. At the same time, we've put substantial effort into building a new internal comprehensive policy tracking system, which in a way is a beefed up version of our online policy database at the moment. So this past year, or 2023 rather, we put a lot of effort in developing that as a tool to help us keep abreast of the policy developments. Now, in the interim, so in the odd years when we're not doing a scorecard, we're going to produce the interim programs report, which is effectively the first chapter of the regular scorecard. It contains the same metrics as the programs chapter in the full scorecard, and we'll be releasing it every year really, because it's chapter 1 of the regular scorecard, but we'll still produce it every year. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So the interim programs report is looking at results from energy efficiency programs in the provinces and territories over the most recent 12-month period that program administrators typically report on the performance of these programs. Now that varies across the country by program administrator to program administrator. Some program administrators operate on a calendar year basis, some operate on a fiscal year basis. And then within the fiscal year basis, there are some program administrators that go from Q2 to Q1, right? And the following year. But there is a program administrator that actually has a somewhat different schedule. What we try to do is whatever year the most of the months of that data show up in, that's where we lump. So for fiscal year respondents, this is the kind of data or the timeline that we captured their data. Typically, they would call that fiscal year 2023, but we call it 2022 data since 9 months of that is in 2022. And yeah, this is the data that we're going to be presenting on today. It's largely from 2022. And without further ado, I guess I'll pass it over to Alyssa to start looking at the results.
All right. Thank you, James. Hi, everyone. I want to say thanks for joining us today. So as mentioned, I'm now going to take you through the results of our program's update report. This report looks at a total of 8 different energy efficiency savings, spending, and target metrics at the provincial and territorial level. And today we're going to share the results of a few of these metrics with you. And then on January 18th, when the report is released, you'll be able to dive a little bit further into the rest of the metrics. So I'll note that this report, as James just did, it draws on the most recent year of complete program data, that being programs that were administered in 2022. And the exact 12 months that are reported on kind of varies by program administrator. And as James has just said, just depends on whether they report on a calendar or fiscal year. The report, again, it differs from what you might be used to with the annual and now biennial scorecard report. This report looks at quantitative data only, and it does not include qualitative program and policy data, nor do we score jurisdictions based on program outcomes. All right, so before we get into specific provincial and territorial program outcomes, let's have a look at the results Canada-wide. So here you see annual incremental energy savings at the national level. You can see this is between 2016 and 2022. 2022, the total energy savings, including electricity, natural gas, and non-regulated fuels, it reached 19.5 petajoules. So this is roughly a 7% decline from the previous year in 2021. In 2022, natural gas savings declined about 8%, and then electricity savings declined a little bit less at about 5%. All right, and here is a look at total spending Canada-wide. So more than $1.2 billion was spent in 2022, which was slightly higher than the previous peak spending, which you can see happened in 2018. Spending increased by roughly 8% between 2021 and 2022. And again, as you can see in that light blue or turquoise bar there, the largest increase came from electricity spending, which was up approximately 24% year over year. So now we'll shift into provincial and territorial level data. So here you see electricity savings achieved in 2022. This metric, we calculate it as net electricity savings as a percentage of sales.
So as you can see here, Prince Edward Island achieved the highest savings rate at 1.49% of sales, followed by Nova Scotia at 1.07% and Ontario at 0.67%. These provinces had the highest three savings percentage in 2021 as well, though Nova Scotia and PEI switched position, first and second position in 2022. PEI achieved the largest increase in savings percentage year over year. You can see that in the right-hand column there, going from saving 0.86% of sales in 2021 to 1.49% of sales in 2022. If you look at the bottom right corner of the table, national level electricity savings as a percentage of sales decreased ever so slightly at 0.03%. On to provincial and territorial natural gas and non-regulated fuel savings in 2022. This metric is calculated as net incremental savings as a percentage of end-use demand. For this metric, we combine natural gas and non-regulated fuels. So this includes things like wood, propane, oil. Prince Edward Island had the highest savings rate in 2022 at 2.53% of end-use demand. Quebec and Yukon followed with 0.73% savings and 0.56% savings, respectively. These jurisdictions also achieved the highest savings rate in 2021, though Yukon and PEI switched spots, with PEI achieving the highest savings in 2022 and Yukon achieving the third highest savings. PEI's savings rate saw a significant increase year over year. Again, you can see that in the right-hand column. Their savings rate grew from 0.60% of end-use demand to 2.53%. Although we did do a qualitative analysis of programs, things like that, I recognize that's a significant increase. That can largely be attributed to recently launched programs in the province that support water heater, heat pump, and installation upgrades. That's what impacted this figure quite a bit. Again, bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that national level natural gas and non-regulated fuel savings rate changed just slightly between 2021 and 2022, going from 0.38% savings of end-use demand to 0.34%. All right, so here we're looking at the electricity capacity metric. So this metric is a measure of electricity capacity savings from efficiency programs and other capacity resources that might be called upon from things like demand response programs and interruptible rates. This is all as a percentage of the annual peak demand. So for jurisdictions, just as a note, for jurisdictions that have two or more electricity utilities, we estimated this metric based on the utility that reported the higher level of capacity resources.
So Manitoba, Ontario, and Saskatchewan had the highest capacity savings rate in 2022 with 4.81%, 4.26%, and 2.02% respectively.
These are the same three provinces that had the highest capacity savings rate in 2021 as well. All right, so lastly, let's have a look at provincial and territorial program spending in 2022. So we calculate this metric as spending on energy efficiency programs and enabling and supporting activities per capita. Enabling and supporting activities can include things like codes and standards advocacy and market transformation work. In 2021, not this year, that is reported on the previous year, Yukon, PEI, and Nova Scotia had the highest spending rates. And in 2022, Yukon and PEI again had the first and second highest rate of spending, which were $232 and $178 per capita, respectively. New Brunswick had the third highest rate in 2022 at $72 per capita. These were also the three jurisdictions with the largest change in spending year over year, which you can see on the right-hand column there. Looking at the national rate, we see that Canada-wide spending per capita was around $31, which is a slight increase year over year. And yeah, that kind of wraps up a brief look at the program's update report. As I said, the report is going to be released on January 18th, so you can look for it then and dive a little bit further into the other metrics that we have analyzed. And now I'll pass it back over to James.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa. Alyssa mentioned this, but I just wanted to reiterate it to make sure that everybody knows. There is more in the report than just what you've seen here. There's also, we look at energy efficiency savings targets and also spending on low income programs and spending on programs for Indigenous communities. We didn't show them in the presentation, A, because we wanted to keep the presentation short and sweet. And then also B, we want to leave you all wanting more so that you will go and download the report and review the data for those particular metrics. Okay, so moving forward, 2024 scorecard plans and timeline. Okay, so basically, like I mentioned earlier, this is a year-long project that we take on now every other year. We're in the planning phase right now, where we will be sitting down with a bunch of Efficiency Canada team members to discuss what are the new policy developments, how can we adjust our metrics, how can we look at the weighting that we've used previously to rebalance things a little bit to be like a more representative of what are the important things happening in the energy efficiency policy world in 2024. Then we'll move on to the research phase, which, as I mentioned, consists of desk research, which really takes place all year, but also the issuing of an information request, which we typically send out toward the ends of April. That information comes back to us in the early summer. We spend most of the summer doing the analysis and preparing a draft of the scorecard. And then again, it goes out for peer review in September and back to the information request respondents for a second check, and then back to us for finalizing, making revisions, doing the publications, all that kind of stuff, with the goal of releasing a final report in the late fall. So that's the schedule for this year. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that this year, another very exciting thing is happening, and that is that the leadership of the Scorecard project is transitioning from me to Alyssa, which is really exciting. And I personally am really happy and excited to see how Alyssa will succeed with the Scorecard project and continue on in our record of excellence, and perhaps even improve on our record of excellence. Alyssa, I'm really looking forward to it. And I think it's important for the community to know that Alyssa will be the project lead for the Scorecard moving forward. The Scorecard will retain the 5 policy areas that we look at. So I mentioned earlier, there's a number of metrics, over 40, I think, in 2022. That could change this year. And they are spread out across our 5 key policy areas, which are energy efficiency programs. That's what we presented today, but also enabling policy, building codes and standards, transportation and industry. I'm not going to provide an exhaustive list of what those metrics have been. You are welcome to go and consult our previous scorecard. As I said, it's subject to minor, medium modification, depending on how our planning sessions go. Some of the things that we're looking at and exploring, and welcome any feedback, obviously, from the community, either on these or ideas for other metrics that we might look at. But some of the things that we're looking at this year, of particular importance, is policies and programs to utilize demand-side resources to provide grid flexibility, utility integrated resource planning practices, and the extent to which demand-side management resources are incorporated into those practices, the intersection between electrification and demand-side management, and then also regulatory reform to really incorporate more of a mandate for pursuing demand-side management resources as a key part of the broader sustainable energy transition. And so that's really, in a nutshell, all I had to say about our plans moving forward. Alyssa will be the primary contact for the scorecard, so you're always welcome to reach out to her. We welcome, as always, any input and feedback from the community about important things that we might look at, suggestions for how we can approach the things that we already do look at, or anything else that's broadly related to energy efficiency in the provinces and territories. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this informative, and I guess we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Alyssa. I'm really excited to see what you do with the scorecard. That's awesome. So with that, I think, James, you mentioned some of the other metrics. I thought we could maybe start with a question about, since you're now only doing the scorecard every 2 years, what else are you working on in the background with all the time you've got?
Yeah, as I mentioned, part of the idea of moving to the 2-year scorecard project was to free up a little bit more time for us to explore and do deeper dives on some policy issues that the scorecard maybe touches on, but can't really get into great detail on. So in that respect, there's been 2 things that Alyssa and I have been engaged in this year, and that is a closer look at best practices for aligning utility planning with net zero scenarios, futures. And that's my side of the research project. And then on the other side, exploring policy and regulatory opportunities to bridge fuel silos in the delivery of demand side management programs. So fuel silos, basically kind of metaphor for capturing the traditional silos of energy of our demand side management as it's carried out for electricity ratepayers and demand side management as it's carried out for natural gas ratepayers. So those are 2 research projects that we've been engaged in this year, last year rather. And then the other thing that I mentioned earlier was this redevelopment of our internal tracking system, which in effect is a ramped up version of our online policy database. That's something, the work is still ongoing on that as to exactly what that will become in relation to our existing policy database remains to be seen, but that's occupied quite a bit of our time as well this past year.
All very exciting. If anybody on the line is interested in learning more about those, feel free to reach out to James or Alyssa. Okay, so we've got a few questions in the chat box here, and just a straight up debate. Robert, I see your comment in there, and Brendan, I see your comment in response to that. I would be more than happy to set up a chat if either of you are interested. We can talk about that. So let's start with the first question. What does market transformation cover?
Great question. It covers a lot of things. So in the world of energy efficiency programs or efforts rather, there's this like historic distinction between resource acquisition on the one hand and market transformation on the other hand. So resource acquisition, I would hazard a guess, I don't have it in front of me, but it's probably constitutes the lion's share of energy efficiency efforts, at least at the provincial and territorial level. And it's called that because it is in effect a strategy to acquire a resource for the utility grid. So just like you would build new electricity generation or more infrastructure to deliver natural gas to end use consumers, those are supply side approaches to dealing with a resource issue, but demand side management is itself a resource. And so referring to demand side management as resource acquisition, that's what that refers to. Market transformation efforts are a little bit more diffuse. And what they're basically trying to do is like address the challenge of energy efficiency, but a little bit more upstream from the end. And there's a number of different things that provinces and the federal government can do to promote market transformation, research and development, engaging with manufacturers. There really is quite a kind of broad range of things. The scorecard doesn't really delve into market transformation per se in that respect. Although I would encourage you to check out the 2022 scorecard for a little bit more information about what kind of things might be lumped into under market transformation.
Thanks, James. Okay, so Eric is asking, is it possible to link efficiency numbers with programs implemented?
I think I'm going to interpret that question as we know what programs exist in the provinces, and can we say how much energy efficiency savings come from each program? And if I hope that my interpretation is correct. And if that is in case question, then yes, we definitely can. Not for every province, but for most provinces, we have pretty comprehensive data of energy efficiency savings, both planned and actual observed savings, and then also planned spending and actual spending at the program level. I say that is for most provinces because not every single province can provide that level, or I shouldn't say can provide, but does provide that level of data. For the scorecard project, we don't really require it. We only really require aggregate numbers, but we have always tried to get that little bit more granular data where we can, in case it becomes useful to conduct other research questions or address other research questions we might have, but also to help ground truth and understand what's inside the aggregate figures. So for many provinces, we can do that, but not for every single one of them.
Fantastic, thanks. And I received confirmation, but that wasn't a correct interpretation of the question. So another question about some of the metrics that we're using. Have we ever considered or are planning to use metrics coming out of ESG reports at all?
Personally, I've thought about it. Officially, no, not really in the context of the scorecard. The scorecard is very squarely focused at the kind of provincial territorial level. And within that, I would say that there's really two main types of actors that we're looking at. And that is government run programs and programs that are run by either utilities or some kind of like third party administrator whose role is to provide energy efficiency programs. That's really been the focus of the program section of the scorecard. Now, ESG reports is an interesting question. I personally think it would be really interesting to do benchmarking of kind of corporate ESG reports, but that's not really in the kind of domain of the scorecard per se. It's something that we touched on a little bit in some of the research that we've done previously on energy efficiency in the industrial sector. And if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can go to our website. The report's name was A Policy System for Continuous Improvement. I think something along those lines. You should be able to find it. We touch a little bit on the intersections between energy management and the industrial sector and this kind of sustainability and climate change accounting metrics in that report. At the current moment, though, it is not a primary research focus for the organization.
Okay, thanks. That's a whole can of worms, ESG reporting and different types of reporting and different metrics and standards. Yeah, if anybody wants to chat about that, sounds like James has an interest. I guess with that question, this wasn't one of the ones listed, but I'm curious if there are any metrics that you haven't used or are not currently being used for programs in the country. What are they? Like, what would you like to see exist for metrics that doesn't currently exist right now or is not a way that we're capturing information?
That's a tricky question to answer. Off the top of my head, yeah, I'm really not sure. Else, I don't know on it. Yeah.
That's fair.
There's lots of things I think that would be nice to know inside the program's stuff, but also in the broader scorecard project. We'll be talking about some of that during our planning phase because it's always a question of how much can we do in the context of the scorecard? And there's a real kind of balance that we have to maintain between fidelity to the importance of the issue, but also what kind of data is available and how much time and effort and resources would need to be devoted to doing it. And then also figuring out what a best practice is actually deceptively complex thing to do for some metrics. So yeah, that's a bit of an evasive answer maybe to your question.
And I
Yeah.
was going to say too, like, I know it's really hard to align the data from all the different places we get it to come up with one single metric. So I think that's a component as well.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
some
mean,
of
on
this will come out of the different work we're doing this year.
we'll see. On the programs thing in particular, we're always looking at ways to do deeper dives into the programs, not just results, but like results as part of it, but also the design and various different other elements associated with the programs. And that is part and parcel, like a function of how much time and resources we can devote to looking at it, and then also data availability and comparability across the provinces. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Uh, the next question I'm going to pose to you, Alyssa, I think this would be a good one for you. Is it possible to learn from other countries and successful projects and their impacts on efficiency? What work do we do on that piece?
Yeah, it's always possible to learn to see where success has been found. In terms of the programs report and the scorecard, we don't specifically look at best practices around the world. However, in the research that James has mentioned that we have been undertaking this year with moving the scorecard to that every other year publication schedule, within the research we've been doing, we have been looking at best practices around the world for different things going on. But yeah, definitely always important to continue to learn from the success of others. Doesn't directly apply to the programs, but something we always do. Yeah.
And maybe one day, if we see these innovations in programs, I think another example I can think of is in our retrofit mission report, we talk about the Energy Strong program, which did not come from North America. So when we were writing reports, sometimes these international best practices will make it into our report if we see it as a practice that would be beneficial. Okay, next question came from our very own Brendan. So you guys better have a good answer for this. What provinces are planning on increasing or decreasing savings in the future?
Alyssa, I'm going to pass this one to you.
It has put me on the spot. Now I have to remember what the savings targets are. You know what? Give me a second. This is a little look-see into some of the metrics that we didn't chat about.
Sure. But I'll give you a sec to do that. And then
Sure.
I think this is actually, I'll pose the question to James while you're doing that. So this is something we have actually chatted about, and Philip is asking about including municipalities that either do this or don't. So I know there are some pretty robust programs when it comes to low income energy efficiency that are either on the go or planned related that municipalities are doing, sometimes even in lieu of provinces doing them. So what are your thoughts on that, James? This is looking at some data.
Yeah, municipalities, it would be great to do some like a whole municipal scorecard. There's like only so much room for so many scorecards. The thing is with municipalities is that it's not, we can't do it within the confines of this scorecard. There are some metrics in the broader scorecard that kind of get down to municipal level initiatives. They're largely policy metrics where there's greater scope for municipalities to play a role. But it's also, to the extent that we deal with municipalities, it's mostly like on the relationship between the province and the municipality. There are obviously provinces that don't have a high degree of institutionalized demand side management, either in the utility sector or on the government side. I don't know if I should say high degree, but there are provinces that definitely don't have it in the utility sector. And there are provinces where other organizations play an important role in delivering energy efficiency programs and acquiring energy efficiency as a resource. We do attempt to capture some of that, but it's outside the domain of how we've traditionally thought about the provincial and territorial scorecard. Yeah, it's challenging to say, but typically that kind of stuff falls outside of it, the scorecard, I would say.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's a challenge that we continue to pose for ourselves and something we keep an eye on in the background. Okay, Alyssa, how are you feeling? Or did you want me to ask James another question?
No, ready to go.
Are you ready? Okay,
So
so the question
so
again was what provinces are planning on increasing or decreasing savings in the future?
Sure. Yes. One of the metrics that we look at in this upcoming programs update report are targeted savings. And so some utilities, some provinces have targeted savings up until 2027. Some have a couple of years from now, that kind of thing. We see that in the metrics, we have specifically looked at efficiency program targets. We have also included targets in brackets that include other things, other demand side management activities. So that's things like demand response and codes and standards works, things like that. So it differs a little bit by jurisdiction. We see that Efficiency Nova Scotia and the province of Nova Scotia is looking to increase their target significantly above the 1% level by 2020, consistently up until 2025 is when they have targets out. We look at New Brunswick Power, they're increasing as well. The province of New Brunswick has their climate plan, which they have updated recently. And then some utilities in BC and Efficiency Manitoba, they have some targets that include those extra demand side management activities. So we do see some growth, which is exciting to see. That's on the electricity side. And then it varies a little bit in terms of natural gas and non-regulated fuels, but similar type. Again, Efficiency Nova Scotia is growing. They have targets until 2025 that you'll see in the programs report. Yeah. And then again, Efficiency Manitoba, they have both a programs only target, and then they have target with demand side management activities as well. So that's what we're seeing so far.
If I could
Fantastic.
just tag on to the end of that
Go for
as
it.
well, one thing I would say, and I'm pretty sure that the data supports this, Alyssa, no province is planning to decrease savings, I don't think. And an interesting thing that we've seen happen over the last year or so has been in some provinces a kind of somewhat dramatic reversal of or increase of over their previous plan, so that they had a plan in place and then realized, whoa, this is not right. We're not acquiring nearly enough energy efficiency to deal with the amount of demand growth that we're now seeing. And so in 3 provinces off the top of my head that I can think of, actually 4, I think, I had to go back to the drawing board and take another look at their energy efficiency targets moving forward. But yeah, I think, there's been some interesting changes there in the last 12 months or so.
Thank you to you both, and especially Alyssa. That was an extremely cohesive answer considering we put you on the spot. So I appreciate it. Okay, this is a cool question. I like this. And I think it could be an interesting thing for us to consider. John writes, a key issue in buildings energy efficiency is the competency of the workforce that will do this work. This raises the question of what governments are doing to invest in expanding their training capacity to serve the growing number of workers, also what they're doing to increase climate and energy efficiency content in curriculum. Is this something that you would consider including in a scorecard?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So workforce constraints on energy efficiency across all the policy areas is something that's definitely on our radar. We have dealt with this in previous scorecards, maybe not in as much depth as we would like to. That's one of those policy areas that's definitely something that we're looking at trying to figure out how to do a bit of a deeper dive. To date, the extent to which workforce development and training has been incorporated in the scorecard has been to look at policies for training, for energy efficiency training, and efforts to bring people to the building kind of workforce more broadly. But it's definitely something that we will be looking at this year to see what's possible, what's feasible that we could do to have a closer look at it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so unfortunately, there are quite a few more questions in the question box that we're not going to have time to get to. Many of them are really good ideas in terms of questions posed as potential metrics. So I do encourage you, if you have ideas or do have questions that you think would contribute, to please reach out. So before we leave today, I just wanted to mention our next discovery session. January 26th, we have Sarah Riddell joining us, who is Efficiency Canada's Policy Research Associate on clean heat. And she will be discussing the recently released Advancing Canadian Appliance and Equipment Standards. We are writing a policy brief on that, where it digs into what's included in the next amendment into the regulations, how the US and other nations are moving forward on these standards. And then we'll offer recommendations on how Canada can lead. So if that's something you're interested, we really encourage you to join. And then I also just wanted to reiterate that the report James and Alyssa were talking about today is not currently available yet. It will be released Friday, January 18th. However, if you are an ally of Efficiency Canada, you would get these reports a week early. So our allies would have received the early access to the report this morning before we even had this session. So if you have any interest in becoming an ally of Efficiency Canada, I would love to chat with you. This session was recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel in about a week. And James and Alyssa, thank you so much. That was just a great presentation, really great content, and excellent answers to questions. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody to joining us again. And we will see you in 2 weeks for Sarah's discovery.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.